Hello everybody. The new programming style, the new programming strategy that is called OOPS, Object-Oriented Programming Strategy, is what we are going to learn using C++. There are some other object-oriented programming languages also like Java and Python. Yeah? So, but we are going to use C++. We are going to use OOPS concepts with C++ here. When we talk about OOPS, what it means? It is object-oriented programming. Okay, where the emphasis is on the data. Now, I give you a scenario here, which will try to draw some analogy, which will try to explain you what is C++ and what is C. Suppose you have a banking software. There is a bank, there is a manager, there is a banking software, and suddenly there is a crash in the banking software. Think and tell me what the bank manager will be worried about, the banking software or the associated data? Data. So data is of prime importance. Okay, suppose there is another machine, which is an aeroplane, which is flying at say 8,000 feet, and at that point of time there is a system failure. Okay, now what the pilot will be worried about, the data or the system? System, isn't it? So scenario in which the emphasis is on system program, that is called structured programming and should be implemented in languages like C. The scenarios where the emphasis is going to be on data, not the system or the mechanism, the emphasis is going to be data, is called object-oriented programming. Structured programming and object-oriented programming. Okay, C is structured programming language, whereas C++ is object-oriented programming language. You got that? Because you have different type of scenarios, so therefore we have to have different type of programming languages for those different scenarios. In C++, that's in OOPS actually, the emphasis is on data, not the procedure, not the program, not the system. OOPS is a relatively new approach to programming as compared to structured programming. It supports the creation of new data types and operations to manipulate those types. Data is very protected, safe. Very protected and very safe. The structured programming is a collection of functions and functions and functions and functions and functions, whereas the object-oriented programming will have a slightly different architecture in which there would be obviously functions, but there will be data tied to every function. Emphasis is on doing things algorithm in the structured oriented programming, but emphasis is on data in object oriented programming. OOPS treat data as a critical element and everything works around the data. It ties data closely to functions that operate on it. Let me open the Jamboard, new Jamboard. These are the concepts, and you must be very clear about these concepts. If you feel anything that you want to discuss more, or you have some queries, cross questions, more clarifications, be very prompt to ask me. Yeah? Now what happens here in OOPS is programming strategy is such that you will have some functions, functions. Now you can't straight away have functions. You will have to have some local data also associated with that functions. So you will have data and you will have functions closely tied. Now what is this architecture? What happens in any other programming language that you have learned, like you have learned C, you simply go ahead and declare some data. You declare some data, just like this, some data. Now this data is like you declare int I, but you don't know what you're going to do with this I. There is no operations associated with I. I is an independent variable in which you'll store some integer value, and nobody knows, including you, that what operations will be performed on that I. I will be incremented or decremented or assigned or reassigned or used as some variable expression. There is no information about how this I is going to be used, what operations are going to be performed in this I. There is not even remote information on that. But in C++, what happens? The scenario is different here. you will have functions. You can't simply declare data just like that. You will have operations on data to be defined. Immediately. Means the moment you have data defined, you also define operations on data immediately, that on this data you will perform these operations. So no data element should be declared just straight away, data alone, and what operations, what task, nothing defined, not like that. So in C++, you have to have the data and the operations of the data defined simultaneously. If you declare some data item which will contain data, immediately you declare operations to be performed on the data also. Okay, and this is the programming strategy that is followed in C++, that when you declare data, you also declare operations on data to be performed together. Okay, now this whole thing clubs together is called an object. It ties data closely to functions that operate on it. Ties data closely to the functions that operate on it. Protect it from accidental modification from outside a function. This data could be accessed through these functions. Now some important statement about this, let me give you here, that once the data is defined, data is tied to functions. Fine. That is one point. Important point. Another important point, how the data is protected. Data could be accessed only through functions which are operations. Okay. Another thing, data could not be accessed directly from outside the क्लास. इसको हम एक क्लास कहते हैं. तो ये डेटा डायरेक्टली बाहर से एक्सेस नहीं हो सकता. ये फंक्शंस के ऑपरेशंस और डेटा ना, ये फंक्शंस हैं, इनके थ्रू ही एक्सेस होगा और कोई तरीका नहीं है इनको एक्सेस करने का. तो ये प्रोटेक्टेड है. ओके, builds data and functions around these objects. This whole thing is called a class, which is a design actually. And when you implement this, it will be called object. I'll show you how. The data of these objects can be accessed only by the functions associated with the object. All these data that you see could be accessed only through the functions that operate on it, and there is no other way to access it. Okay, but functions of one object can access functions of another object. That we'll see in a moment. So basically, the objects are created like this. You will have having data and some functions like this. So let me explain this concept through another diagram here. So you'll have this like this. This is one such design, you can say. Now this design about how the data will be arranged and how the operations or the functions will be arranged. These operations are basically functions, that will perform, that will work on another function, many functions that will work on the data. So you can have another class also, just
sir.
Hmm?
This is statement that data is tied to function and data could not be accessed only through function.
No, no. Only through functions.
Data,
Data could not be accessed directly. Accessed
जी,
only through functions. तो ये statement इधर है रुको. So let me do it. Data is tied to functions. Okay, that is one statement. Data could not be accessed directly. Data could be accessed only through functions is another statement. Data could not be accessed directly from outside the class. हाँ, ये तीन statements हैं. अब बताओ.
कहते जैसे सी में तो हम ऐसा होता है ना कि हम जैसे malloc वगैरह से भी मेमोरी एक्सेस करके हम किसी लाइक डेटा को हम लाइक अलग से प्रिंट करा सकते थे, बट यहाँ पे वो चीज़ नहीं होती है ना.
Here, the only rule is that if you want to access this data, it will be only through these functions. Data could not be accessed directly from outside the class.
तो यहाँ पे
How this is implemented, I'll tell you in that through implementation that how you will do that. But yes, it could be accessed only and only through functions. Yeah, please go ahead. और भी कुछ बोलने लगे तभी आप.
नहीं, यही तक कि जैसे यहाँ पे फिर जैसे हम लोग सी में तो malloc वगैरह करते थे, तो यहाँ पे वो चीज़ नहीं होती है.
यहाँ करेंगे malloc करेंगे. Malloc will give you some data. Now it depends. If the data is in here, then it will be accessible through some functions, not directly.
ओके.
सर सो देन यहाँ पे लोकल और ग्लोबल वेरिएबल जैसा टर्म नहीं यूज होने वाला है.
वो भी होगा, वो भी होगा, देखेंगे. Now this is what I have explained just now is something called class. In which you will define what is the data, what is a function, which function will access what data, how the function will access data. This is called class. Okay, it is nothing but simply a design, a prototype. It is a simple design about how the things are going to happen. It's a design, it's a prototype. It's a template. It's not a real world existence. ये भी डिजाइन है, प्लान है कि ऐसा होगा, हो नहीं गया, ये प्लान है बस. ठीक है ना, कि ऐसे डेटा होगा, ऐसे फंक्शंस होंगे. जैसे int int, when you declare a variable called int is a plan that there will be 32 bits. Every bit will be powered 2 to power 0, 2 to power 1, 2, like this. It's a plan. But when you declare int I is the actual instance of int. Only when you declare I instance of int that the memory will be allocated, isn't it? Similarly, the instance of class could be declared. The instance of class that is declared is called object. Instance of class. It is at this point of time when you declare the object that the memory will be allocated. Until unless the object means a variable of type class was declared, everything was just a plan. It did not exist in a real world. Only when you declare an object that is an instance of the class, like I is an instance of integer. Only when you declare an instance of the class called object, at this point of time memory will be allocated to your designed class. Not before this. Yes, tell me.
सर अगर मैंने क्लास डिफाइन करी है और कोई इसका ऑब्जेक्ट डिफाइन नहीं किया है, या फिर ये सेगमेंट कुछ
नहीं. In that case, no memory will be allocated, and there will be no instance. So objects can access functions. Objects can access functions and functions can access data. Data डायरेक्टली एक्सेस नहीं हो सकता था, ठीक है. Emphasis is on data in OOPS. Program is divided into objects. Object. क्योंकि हर एक object के अंदर you have function also, you have data also. Isn't it? The whole program is also inside the object. Isn't it? So object is divided into functions and data. Just a minute. Data structures are designed such that they categorize the object. Functions that are tied to the data of the object are tied together in the data structure. All these things are there. Okay, fine. Data is hidden and cannot be accessed by external functions. Object communicate with each other through object. All this blah 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 thing theory you can read. Definition of OOPS and benefits of OOPS. This is all theory. It is given in your notes. You can read that. Application of use also of OOPS also you can see. The latest addition to the OOPS since the new architecture of Linux supports the concept of OOPS in the kernel space also. Therefore, we have included C++ programming in our training. I would like to come to this point and start your training take your training here onwards. Now, this is the OOPS concept that I have given to you. This. Okay. Emphasis is on data. Data is accessed through functions only, and the data and functions has to be brought together. And this is called a design or a prototype or a template called a class, and then the classes will have instances of classes that will be called objects. That is fine, OOPS concept. Now these OOPS concepts have 8 attributes. OOPS attributes. Attributes of OOPS. In the whole C++ training, we have to learn these 8 attributes only. Okay, 8 attributes. And to explain you about these 8 attributes, it will take me to take you through 30 sessions and a project. Now, attributes of OOPS. The very first attribute of OOPS is a class, where we understand what is a class, जो मैंने अभी architecture दिया. Second is object, which is an instance of class. Then after that you have something called data abstraction. Now abstraction means hiding something, showing only relevant information. If you look at this architecture of OOPS, data is abstracted, hidden from the rest of the world. Data is abstracted or hidden from the rest of the world. Only relevant, valid access to the data is given, and that is through functions. Okay. Data abstraction. Then another OOPS is encapsulation. OOPS attribute is encapsulation. Encapsulation means like this. Right hand is encapsulated in the left hand. Encapsulation is bringing together and encapsulating, enveloping. So if you see that, here the data and the functions are brought together, and the data is encapsulated with functions, cannot be accessed directly. The data is encapsulated with functions. So this property is called encapsulation. We have to learn these things. Then inheritance. Inheritance is like you inherit property of your parents. A sibling inheriting properties of the predecessor, the parents. Inheritance is like you design some classes A, then you design another class B from A, which will have all the features of A plus some additional features of itself. So using this mechanism, you can always have next version of your product. inheritance. Then you have polymorphism. Poly means many, morph means forms, many forms of anything. You can have many forms of operator or many forms of function. Like plus means addition of numbers. But if I say I want to add two strings using plus, that is possible in C++. So the plus operator will have many forms, adding numbers and adding strings both. So this is a property of object to have many forms for the operators or the functions is called many forms, polymorphism. And then data binding. The data is bound to certain functions to perform specific operations only. This is called data binding. And last but not the least is message passing. Now the objects, once implemented, will occupy space in memory. This is the real world entity. This was just an imaginary thing. Not imaginary though, but it was a template. This is the real world existence. Now objects can communicate with each other directly. This is called message passing. Okay. So this is the 8 attributes of OOPS that we have to learn throughout C++ from the beginning. Okay. So we set the agenda here, what we are going to do in C++. So all these things are explained, you can read it about wherever. The programming, the rule for programming languages say that if you want to learn swimming, you can't read a book about it and then start learning swimming. You have to first get into the water, isn't it? Similarly, when you have to learn C++ programming or any programming language for that matter, you have to have program implemented. Okay. There are so many programs implemented already, but I would follow a different strategy in which I will write fresh programs for you and hope to have some errors. If you will have errors, then we will be able to get into trouble, get into errors, and then resolve it. B.22.04.002. 22 is year, this is the month, and this is the project. The C++ training modules are divided into projects and modules. Projects are those module things in which we have some projects to be implemented, and the modules are the things, Linux system administration, in which there is no project. There is a project. These are all projects. These are module shell scripting. Yeah? So I make a directory on your name, and let's go to this directory. We'll do most of the things in this directory, and instead of reading and seeing the original programs, we'll try to write our own programs and try to get into errors, face errors. Hello.c++. The file name extension will be C++, CPP. So in here you will have include just like C, but there is no header file to be included. In C++, everything is a class. Okay, there is a class called IOStream. Now IOStream is a class which is declared in some file. In C or any other language, you know that there is something called file, which looks something like this, and if this is a file, then this file will have a file name. Suppose this is your file. Suppose this is your file. This file will have a file name. Isn't it? It's obvious. File will have a file name. Fine. But suppose there is a region of file, portion of file, okay, which is not actually file, which is a part of file, portion of file, and you want to give a name to the portion of file. You want to give a name, new name, to the portion of file. Well, that is possible. The name that is given to the portion of file is called name spaces. Right? Namespaces. So we'll use a namespace called std. So IOStream is a class in a file in which all the essential things that you need for C++ programming are defined. Out of those many essential things, I want to use a portion of file for few essential things. Those portion of file for few essential things is where C in Cout is defined. So that portion is called std. So we'll use a namespace std from IOStream where basic IO mechanism, utilities, commands or routines are defined, so that basic IO could be done. Even the main function is also defined. C++ will start
So
just like this. Yes.
std like namespace in IOStream, like we can say like as a subclass.
IOStream is obviously a subclass, but let's not go into that. So right now, understand everything in C++ is a class. IOStream is also a class. Now, if it is a class, it must be stored in some file, isn't it? So it's a class and it is stored in a file that you see in the white color here. Okay, but this huge class in the huge file have so much data, so much information, but I don't want everything. I want some part of this class in the file. So that part I have chosen and I have given that part as a namespace called std.
So, sir, the file name is IOStream.
No, file name is not mentioned here. Only the class is mentioned. This class was kept inside this file.
Okay, sir.
Now portion of file I have taken means portion of class I have taken and given it a name std. Some basic essential C++ utilities, routines and commands were given there, like scene, cout, main. All these are defined in this portion of the class in this portion of the file and given a new name, namespace std. So I have considered it in our program now.
So it means जैसे हम namespace हमने std like define कर रहे हैं, तो हम जो like उसके functions use करेंगे cout, cin, तो उसमें से वही उन्हीं से related like जो भी data होगा वो fetch होगा उस portion में.
हाँ, सबसे पहले ये std हमने डिफाइन नहीं किया है, ऑलरेडी डिफाइंड है, हमने यूज किया है, ठीक है. और हाँ, ये जो पोर्शन ब्लू कलर, वो पोर्शन दैट यू सी in this blue color portion, all the objects, functions, variables, routines, utilities, keywords, everything is given. Whatever is given is now included in your program, could be used in your program. It will not give you not declared error. Like C in Cout. What is C in Cout? How do you know? Well, it is declared in that namespace called std, which is a portion of the class IOStream, which is resident in the file.
Taking a partial as you have mentioned std is to resolve the time constraint of a program.
No, it is actually here to resolve mappings of all the identifiers to the associated memory. Suppose you declare some variables, that variable will occupy some memory. So the mapping to the variable name to the memory will all be given in the namespaces. Okay. In C, this task is done by the memory management mechanism of the operating system. But C++ doesn't involve operating system, it has its own mechanism that is implemented through in some namespaces, portion of files, which are actually portion of classes also.
So it means without using namespace हम C++ का like कोई भी program compile ही नहीं कर
नहीं
पाएंगे.
कर सकते, because the moment you use cout, it will not know what is cout.
Even if हमने declare कर रखा है include IOStream.
Still it will not know. I'll show you that. I'll remove it and I'll show it to you. So this is the basic program. Okay, let me first run it, then I'll come back to it. G++ is the compiler for compiling C++ programs. So I compiled my first program and it produced error out. Hello world, congratulations. You have started C++. Now very first thing I do is I comment this namespace. What would happen? Compile. Oh, it says cout is not declared. What is cout? C++, G++ compiler doesn't know. You know? Because it was declared in a IOStream class in a file, and that portion of the file where it was, or the portion of the class where it was declared inside the file is called namespace std, standard definitions. So we have to put standard definitions here.
So इसको ऐसे भी like ले सकते हैं ना. For example, that IOStream is a class and std is like a function जिसमें ये cout, scene.
Std is not a function. Std is a namespace. Namespace means portion of.
तो सो बट अगर किसी चीज को हम पूरा ही ले रहे हैं IOStream को, तो अगर हम
पूरा नहीं
namespace
ले रहे ना. ऊपर हमने तैयारी की पूरा लेने की.
okay.
When you in line number 1 you say hash include IOStream, you are prepared to take the whole IOStream, but from the whole IOStream you actually took only that portion of IOStream which was termed namespace std.
सर std को एज ए हेडर फाइल यूज कर सकते हैं
No.
जैसे C में किया.
No, there is no concept of header files in C++. In
Okay,
C++,
it's class.
everything is a class.
Excuse me, sir.
Huh.
Sir, I remember in class 12 we use hash include iostream.h. So why we are not including .h here?
The .h file concept is gone in C++. Now we are using C++ 17 standard, 2017 standard, which is a latest standard, which is the C++, the way the C++ is redesigned now. It could be used in kernel space programming also, embedded programming also, embedded application protocol design everywhere. So therefore, in the new design, that is C++ 17 standard, which is the latest standard, header file concept is gone. Now everything in C++ is header files, classes. You go anywhere, you read books, internet, everything, they will use header files. But I'm sorry, that's old style of C++ programming. I would not follow that, because that could not be used for embedded development.
Okay, sir, one more question. What if we need to include the entire IOStream, then what should be the scenario here?
Well, IOStream have some other namespaces also, which I'll introduce to you as we proceed further. You have to include those namespaces also.
So
I mean to say that there are some other portions of the file that also has to be included using namespace, other name. If required, we'll do that.
So, sir, how can we know that how many namespaces this IOStream contains?
Well, that is what we will do in this training. We'll learn how to do that. Not only using the existing namespaces, we will create our own namespaces also one day. See this? It's
In the
already
same
there.
IOStream, in this or
Look at this session number 23. You will create your own namespaces here.
Generally, embedded system has a space constraint, so I believe that to resolve that only we are using a subclass.
Yeah, that's very important point, because if you include everything, your programs will become big.
big, right.
So namespaces will make it very efficient with respect to
Reduce
time
the
and,
complexity of the program, sir.
time complexity as well as space complexity. Okay. Now this is one program which I have written and compiled here. Now some elaboration is required. So about this line number 1, which is about the header. Line number 1 tells you that including IOStream class. Resident in some big file. We include this class as it declares objects, classes, and objects are required for entering program and doing basic IO. Okay. See, all these things are already declared here. Line explanation for each and everything will come here. You know, lines beginning with a pound sign hash are used by the preprocessor. You know, the concept of preprocessor that I have already given you in your C program build process. C++ have the similar build process. Slight variations are there though. The directive hash include tells the preprocessor to include the IOStream standard file, and that includes IOStream class. IOStream. This actually is a class which declares standard input-output libraries in C++. Now, when I say it's a class, it has this design.
Excuse me, sir.
Means it will have it'll have some data and some functions working on that data. Yes, Vaibhav.
So in case of C, whenever we are using preprocessor, it completely put that particular file in place of hash include std io.h.
Yeah.
But in this case, we are also using preprocessor. So if we follow the similar form, so the complete IOStream class must be kept in place of in hash include IOStream using the preprocessor.
What the preprocessor will do is it will consider the whole IOStream. It will try to include everything, but then using namespace, only the portion will be left and the rest will be discarded.
Okay. The preprocessor will keep copy all of the data of IOStream, but the namespace will discard the
Namespace will keep only mapping out of everything, and rest of the things will be discarded. Actually, in C++, let me tell you, between the preprocessor and the compiler, there is a mapping mechanism, okay, which will do discarding everything that has been included by the preprocessor. Okay. STD namespace. All the elements of the standard C++ library that is implemented in the IOStream class are declared within that namespace. In this case, the namespace is the name std is used. We put this line in to declare that we make use of the functionality offered by the namespace std. Okay. Now, here I say that it includes IOStream resident file in a big file. You know, we include this class as it declares classes and objects required for entering into the program and doing basic IO. Now, this is a big class. Okay, so we would not include the whole big class. In fact, just a portion of this file we need, the portion of this class we need, we don't need everything. For that, we have used namespace. Line number 3. namespace usually keeps mappings of identifiers to instances. Okay, std is a namespace that would include things required in our program. And these things are totally clubbed together and called std. Okay, then line number 5 is the main function, which is entry point of your program. You know that, nothing talking about that. I want to talk about cout. cout is an object. ये object है, मतलब it is an instance of a class in which you have functions, in which you have data of a class called OStream. ये OStream क्लास का ऑब्जेक्ट है, ठीक है ना? A function in the OStream class is designed to put data onto std out file descriptor number 1. Okay, this is cout.
सर अगर OStream is also a class तो हम include OStream भी कर सकते हैं ना?
हाँ, वो भी कर सकते हैं, तो फिर उसमें इनपुट नहीं होगा, सिर्फ आउटपुट होगा.
Okay.
Now this one that you see here, this is called insertion operator. Okay, it inserts data into the standard output stream, take it from the program and insert it into the standard output stream. Insertion operator. Okay, one last thing. Yeah, notice there is another insertion operator here. One last thing about this EMDL. This is a manipulator. It will add new line, just like \n in C. Okay. This was your hello world that you understood. Half. Any questions?
सर अगर न्यू लाइन नहीं करनी है तो
ENDL हटा दो और ये वाला मैनिपुलेटर भी, ये वाला इंसर्शन ऑपरेटर भी हटा दो. ठीक है ना. So this is the beginning of oops. This is the beginning of C++. At least hello world to लिख ही लेना सारे. Okay. So I will continue my discussion in C++ in the next class. Just watch for it.